and welcome. It's Mediation, the New Possibilities Hour. It is October 1st, 2020, and we're very happy to have as our special guest today, Kimberly Best, coming to us from Nashville, Tennessee. Kimberly comes to us from a background and discipline other than law, I'm happy to say. Kimberly is a mediator who, in her other professional background, is a registered nurse and has significant expertise in medicine and healthcare. And we're going to be talking about a very sensitive and important conversation today, a conversation on the subject of end-of-life issues and mediating end-of-life conversations. Before we get to that, though, I want to remind everybody that this is part of the Will Work for Food project, which Natalie organized in May, and which she so graciously allowed me to join in and become part of the team. We don't charge for these great webinars. Rather, we ask you to contribute to a food bank to fight the problem of food insecurity if you like what you see. And Natalie, it's tremendous. Every week I call on you and ask you to report on how much we've raised so far, rather how much our listeners and our audience has been generous enough to contribute to food banks around the world so far. So please give us the update.
So Jeff, this is the moment in time when we can all do a Snoopy dance. We have surpassed $55,000 in donations to food banks worldwide. 55,000. So to everyone who has participated, contributed, even $1, $5, $10, whatever your contribution was, thank you so much for your generosity.
Indeed. Thanks to everybody. Natalie, thank you for organizing the project. Kim and the other great speakers we've had, thank you so much. And most of all, thank you to the participants who come to watch these webinars and who contribute to food banks because they like what they see. And with that, Kim, we're very much looking forward to hearing your presentation and learning how to deal better with this sensitive, delicate, and important topic. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Natalie. It is an honor to be here. Happy October 1st or March 180th, depending on if you're a glass half full or half empty kind of person. This is my food bank in Nashville, and inspired by Natalie and her project, I actually have been volunteering my time there. So I have in COVID logged 120 hours on behalf of what Natalie's doing. It's wonderful because the people are incredible, but I get to see firsthand how hard people are working to feed people and how much impact it has on the people needing that help. So I just wanted to add Second Harvest to the list. I let them know that you all would be thinking about them today, and they were pretty excited about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So before I start talking about how we're all going to die, I thought I would introduce a little light moment. The New York Times did a fun little 6-word memoir on COVID based on Ernest Hemingway writing a 6-word memoir that went, "For sale, baby shoes never worn." And some of the responses to that memoir from the New York Times were things like, "Happy hour when I say so," "My dog is my best friend," and my personal favorite, well, the one that touched me the most, was "Gorging content does not feed the soul." So I wonder if in the chat box you might come up with your own 6-word memoir on your pandemic experience so far. And just type it in the chat box and Natalie will read it for me. Did I say the one that was "My dog is my best friend"? I saw that one too.
You want me to read these to you as they come in, Kim?
Yeah, go ahead, Natalie.
So Chuck Crumpton in Honolulu, his reads, "Doors beyond doors open new horizons."
Mm.
Elliot, "I am glad to be married."
Oh.
Well done. We're recording this, Elliot. You can show it to your wife later. Jeff writes, "Eat, period, sleep, period, computer, period, eat, period, sleep, period, computer, period." Vikram writes, 18 till I die." 18 is the number of holes on the golf course. Good for you, Vikram. And my 6-word sentence is, "Yoga pants have been maxed out."
I tried to come up with 6 words about a sweater going over pajamas, you know, for being on Zoom. So we're here to talk about how to help clients and their families make the decisions that reflect what they want most of their ending to look like. And we're going to talk a little bit about the legal, the healthcare, the celebration of life issues, as well as relationships, so that we can provide our clients and their families an avenue for conversation around the best possible ending. In addition to that, with the arrival of COVID, we've been put in a unique position to prepare for potentially accelerated and inevitable, and that is dying and death. So we see in the news, a lot of organizations are frontline workers, teachers, having conversations around this, preparing their own wills, writing their own end of life stories, celebrations. And yeah, it's a big time to be talking about what we want to do. So I want to thank you all for being here for a moment. I think, you know, being involved with planning somebody's ending, the end of their story, the end of their life, is really a sacred moment. And this isn't about writing a will. It's writing how someone is going to be remembered. And we're not talking about really a healthcare plan. We're talking about how much someone might have to suffer and endure and struggle to find their own line between hope and regret. And at the end of all this, because relationships matter too, we're helping people navigate through some really hard things. So thank you all for stepping into that territory. Can you put up question number 1 for me, Natalie? Yeah, can you easily talk about death and dying? I got to take the poll too. I didn't realize it. You just put up the results whenever you want. Oh, got lots of yeses. Oh, y'all are good. That's really good. Yeah, so I talk about conversations around death and dying as the final frontier of taboo subjects that we don't talk about. You know, we can talk about sex, we can talk about religion. Right now we can't talk too much about politics, but talking about death is something that's been difficult to do. And to help people make decisions, we have to be comfortable with doing that. I think it's brave to be able to approach the subjects. There's a lot to talk about. And I tell my clients it's brave of them to come into wanting to make this plan. There's also peace in that bravery. So we have an opportunity to teach our children how to do this because we're talking about things by making it safe and okay, and not by accepting something extraordinary, but just making peace with what is. Oh, my thing doesn't want to. Okay, so for human beings, life is meaningful because it's a story, and in stories, endings matter. That's a quote from Atul Gawande's Being Mortal. If you haven't read the book, it is an extraordinary and so accurate depiction of not only what's normal for our bodies for aging and illness, but also about the medical system and our expectations of the medical system, which are sometimes very high and unreasonable. And sometimes, we're not looking into enough what the consequences of our choices are in medicine. So I worked in every ICU there is. And I've worked in trauma, and I've worked in the emergency department. And from the very first person that I saw die, I sat beside her bed, and I had this vision of her life being a book. And I pictured these moments very shortly before her death as her back cover closing. And I wondered what was inside that she hadn't shared, that people didn't know about her. I wondered about her life. And from that moment on, that was back in 1980, from that moment on, every time I was with someone who died, I had the same thought of our life is our story, and we're writing our story. And that'll be a theme throughout this, because it turns out that it's a theme for a lot of things around end-of-life choices. So I use this for a metaphor for my clients too. Our story is our legacy, and our stories make us immortal. So when people come in talking about these hard things, they're usually in a transition, and transitions are difficult. Nobody likes change. So I think it's important to talk about what this is like, what's going on with the changes, and, what are the fears? I mean, let it all out. I believe while we don't get to choose the circumstance we find ourselves in, we get to choose who will be in those circumstances. So part of my own work with my clients is empowering them to choose who they want to be as they're writing their story. Yeah, well, we all know with conflict, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But for end-of-life decisions, time, money, health, relationships are saved as conflict is reduced. At times, the embarrassment of being labeled as incapacitated is avoided when families can step up and work together. Issues can be resolved quickly instead of waiting or for court. Risk and safety issues can be identified. Personal issues can be addressed. But best of all, families become better role models for the next generations when they're able to resolve disputes, engage in supported decision-making, and respect the need for safety and autonomy of their loved ones. A little bit on safety and autonomy. So those are both needs that we have as human beings. And it turns out that we value autonomy all through our life. Even as we're older, autonomy ranks as one of our top most important needs. But our generation behind us, as we get older, they choose safety over autonomy for us, right? So that's a higher value. So they're wanting to wrap us in bubble wrap and not let us live. Because with part of the medical system, being alive has been more important than living a quality of life, right? So I don't assume that safety is a priority. It's as safe as you can under conditions. Sometimes for some people that I work with, safety is a priority. They want to be very careful, but some people are willing to risk not unsafety, but living fully, which may be less safe as their body deteriorates. Because, just to be blunt, they recognize they're coming to the end of their life anyway, and would rather live it doing what they want than being terribly safe and being constricted in that life. I am my choices. I cannot not choose. If I do not choose, that's still a choice. If faced with inevitable circumstances, we still choose how we are in those circumstances. So probably all of you know the consequences of people who haven't made the choices. around how they want their end of life. I want to tell you about a client of mine. He came to my office about 2 years ago. He is a retired football player, a big guy, a strong guy, and received a terminal diagnosis. And this disease he has will render him more and more unable to move until eventually he will have no movement, no swallowing. And he came into my office and he said, you know, I'm ready to die. I've got this disease. I don't want to go through this. So I'm just going to sit in my chair and wait to die. And I said, well, you can do that. That is an option, because I strongly believe in not taking away anyone's options at all. I said, you can do that. But my dad, who also had a chronic, eventually terminal illness, received his diagnosis and thought he would do the exact same thing. And it took him 10 years to die. So I said, you know, in the meantime, you're modeling for your children. In the meantime, where can you find joy? In the meantime, so exploring a lot of options. Now, this has been over 2 years, and he is in hospice care right now, but it has been a good 2 years for him. He wouldn't have changed that. So I think, you know, talking about our choices, talking about the options, letting everything be on the table until you figure out what works is important when talking about these things. So if Moses had gone to Harvard Law School and spent 3 years working on the Hill, he'd have written the 10 Commandments with 3 exceptions and a savings clause. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I don't even get that. But I do know, as a non-attorney mediator, and sometimes I'm talking with non-attorney mediators, but also with healthcare people, the one thing attorneys have asked me to do is to let people know that we need attorneys here. So I'm not advocating for whoever's on there that's an attorney, because things like LegalZoom, state differences, there's too much margin for error. So if you're not an attorney and you're helping people walk through this thing, please make sure that you have an attorney who is in the state that, that your client lives in. There are lots of documents that go with end-of-life decisions. I'm going to talk about some about the healthcare ones. I'm skipping over the legal ones because that's not my area of expertise. If anyone has questions later on that, I think I'm going to turn that over to Jeff. But I have given a handout to Natalie to share with you all. And that is pages of how to prepare all the information that your clients and their families will need. It's for them to prepare, not for you. But the things to have their affairs in orders, to make it easy if something should happen to them, for their families to be able to handle what's going on with them. I didn't ask, would you put up question number 2 for me, Natalie? I skipped over this. Going back to the documents. Oh.
I said no problem, and now.
That's all right. We can actually skip that. Just skip it. Seriously, it's fine. The question was simply how many have a will and how many have the trifecta, which is the will, the healthcare directive, and the power of attorney, because it's estimated that only 18% of people have all 3. And that 3 to 7% of estate value can be spent on probate. And I couldn't even find the number for how much money could be spent, or how much money is spent on contested wills and contested guardianship and conservatorship issues. But we all know the horror stories of some of those things. Yeah, so just a side note on that, in trying to find the research for how much is spent on things not prepared well, I did run across a Bloomberg article that estimates $37 billion a year is scammed from seniors. I thought that was just absolutely an incredible number. So our ultimate goal, after all, is not a good death, but a good life to the end. This is where my heart is. Part of my heart is in healthcare. I had a client making decisions for his family because they hadn't made those decisions. And he said to me, you know, there's not another time when you literally hold the decision between life and death for another human being. And that was horrifying for him. So again, these decisions are around the very fine line between hope and regret. This is when it's so much better to have had conversations about our mortality, to understand that we are all going to die. We really need to empower clients and families to be the ones to make the decisions, not the healthcare system, not the legal system, but the clients to be the ones to make their healthcare decisions. And we can make our decisions based on how we want to live all the way to the end. So I encourage clients, to ask questions of their healthcare, to find out what options are, to understand the consequences of a treatment, the percentages of it working, to really know, to be able to weigh if something is going to work for them or not. Because here's something I know to be true from all my years in medicine. With the advances in medicine and our expectations to keep being fixed, it's taking longer and it's harder for people to die. So that's the price we're paying for advances in medicine and just the expectation that we should have a cure for everything. And I think really we should think about that because, you know, if we think about what it is like to live forever or longer or to have a cure for everything, your poll came back up. Okay. Then go visit a nursing home. You know, it's really about quality of life, not just living longer. So some healthcare documents, of course, the advance directive, the written instruction given by the client that either appoints another person to make healthcare decisions or states the person's preferences or both. Supported decision-making varies a lot by state, but it might say something like, my agent will work with me to make decisions and give me the support I need and want to make my healthcare decisions. This means my agent will help me understand the situations I face and the decisions I have to make. Therefore, at times when my agent does not have full power, my agent will provide support to help me understand so that I can, to the best of my ability, make the decision myself. I'm a big believer, you know, there's a capacity and talk around elder capacity. This is not all about elders, obviously. It's anyone preparing for end of life. But this is probably the nurse in me, but always making the assumption and remembering that the client or patient, the one we're talking about, whatever his or her role is at that time, is still a human being and needs to be included and needs to be talked to, whether or not they can respond the way that the way we think they can. So including them in as many conversations. In medicine, we say that the hearing is the last sense to not work. So I do support supported decision making and empowering the patient himself as much as possible. The post, that has different names in different states as well, but it's the medical orders that are written by a physician should there be an emergency, usually done in terminal case patients. And this includes whatever the patient and his doctor have decided what the patient wants if basically an ambulance has to come to the house. So if something traumatic or an emergency happens, it is physicians' written orders on how to treat the patient. And it can include whether or not to have IV fluid, whether or not to start CPR, how much pain medicine to give, what kind of comfort. This is not a legal document. It is a physician's order, yet it's very critical. This is the one that you hear about people posting on the refrigerator or by their bedside table, because if someone calls 911 or any emergency assistance, you know, they're there to treat unless they know otherwise. So this helps keep unwanted treatment from happening. And they do not resuscitate and allow natural death. I want to say on this, they're the same thing. Different states use different terms, basically, and it means if your heart stops or you stop breathing, that you're not going to seek resuscitation. So no ventilator, no CPR. This is something as mediators in our decision making. This I wouldn't take lightly for this reason. In deciding what you want done, sometimes people don't understand how traumatic it is to be resuscitated. It is, of course, not our job to tell them, but it's our job, I think, to have them look into what does that mean to be resuscitated. Because I know even with COVID now, right, when it first came around, a lot of people were going on ventilators, and we heard a lot about ventilators. And I would hear people say, well, if I get COVID, I'll just go on a ventilator. And that was said sort of like, no big deal. It's a horrendous big deal. I mean, you are sedated and paralyzed. Hopefully the sedation is working over the paralyzed. It is traumatic. There's a post-traumatic stress syndrome from it. You are near death when that happens. And really the odds are age dependent, but recovering from that, if you get to that point, the statistics are low about your recovery once you've been on that. So again, understanding what the words look like in real life are, I think, really important. So how do we make these hard decisions? Based on our quality of life. And our quality of life means being as healthy as you can and living as meaningfully a life as you can under your particular circumstances. And that meaning is defined by you. So in my client, being a football player, you know, right now it's football season has started. And I mean, I've just seen him perk up. You know, I jokingly told him I think his body knows it's NFL season again. But that is important to him. As long as he can laugh and communicate with his family, that's important to him. So what makes life worth living for you? What is your bottom line fighting for? I really don't want to keep fighting to stay alive if I can't. And you kind of have to answer these questions in order to get to the heart of the quality of life that you need. So we really have to be willing to have honest and open conversations with our loved ones about what is important, what their fears are, and especially what realistic expectations are given the prognosis. And the prognosis matters. Because again, you know, I really believe when we accept our mortality, when we're in charge of our outcome, we can plan for death so that we can put the fear of death behind us and live more fully. So hospice care is something I bring up, and I think it's worth talking about, worth mentioning, and part of a plan for end of life. My client now is in hospice care. He eventually got to the point where he couldn't walk or turn or move his arms. He can't use his fingers now. Using his cell phone was important to him. He can't do that. It's gotten harder for his family to take care of him. So we gathered around one day, and his family decided it was time for hospice care. And we interviewed a couple hospice agencies. And I do recommend that y'all recommend interviewing people. And he chose one. And we sat in the room with his daughter, his wife, me, and of course, him and the nurse. And she explained hospice care and what she was going to do in her role. And my client's wife said, well, what am I going to do if he starts choking? Should I call an ambulance? And we had talked about that before. You know, the part of hospice is that you don't seek treatment. You can seek treatment if you change your mind, but you're no longer in hospice. So I explained to her that that might be the way that he died by choking, since he would lose swallowing. It might be, but the nurses would keep him comfortable, and you know, it would be hard to be there for that. And if she decided to call an ambulance, that, you know, he would be taken to a hospital and be treated. So she had a moment where she just, you know, this is heavy stuff. It's scary. So the nurse left the room, and the wife said to my client, honey, you really need to decide what you're going to leave for our 3 kids. And now these people have the most amazing sense of humor. They're just incredible people. And he starts laughing. And he starts laughing so that he starts kind of choking. He's really not in risk at this point, but he's laughing, and he sputters out 3 cups of ashes. And his wife starts laughing, which made him laugh more. His daughter looked a little horrified. I looked at him and I said, Clark, that's not his name, if you die now, I'm not going to help you. But the thing that was amazing was I left there going, we're talking hospice, like we're literally signing him up for hospice, and they're laughing. And the reason that happened is because they were prepared. The reason that happened is because we had talked about it. So it is amazing what preparation can do for the whole family to get through these really difficult times. There's also palliative care. They have a lot of similarities. You can seek treatment more with palliative care. I think on hospice care, we probably all know it has changed. I mean, it's different, but they're at your beck and call to help keep you comfortable. And if it's a good agency, they're good at that. But the expectation is that you have 6 months or less to live. That can be renegotiated, though, that they'll renew that. Shouldn't have said like that, huh? So thinking through your end of life wishes, there's, you know, quality of life, treatments and end of life goals, what you want your death to look like. And I've had people describe this, everything from what kind of music they want playing, who they want at their bedside, where they want to be is important. And of course, whether or not they want to be organ donors. So planning for end of life celebration. Yeah, so just a food for thought. You don't have to text it in anywhere, but there's a lot to plan, and there's a lot of new ways to do this. There's a lot of green options, which are very cool. You can write your own obituary, which I've seen, and one of my favorite stories was a letter I received from someone who said, told his wife's story. He said that he's in his 80s, she was probably near there, and had a terminal illness and a feeding tube. And at one point she recognized that the feeding tube was keeping her alive, and she was ready to go. So they did a living funeral. They gathered their friends and families. They had a meal. They talked about her like they would have if she had already died. They paid tribute to her. And at the end of that evening, the feeding tube was pulled, and his wife died a few days later. For him, it was just such relief and such peace because she got the ending that she wanted. So I don't know if you all have ever planned someone's service without knowing what they want, or if you've been part of a service where you know you're doing what the person wanted. But those are 2 truly extraordinarily different experiences, because planning what someone wants gives them a lot of peace. Now, for myself, I had this conversation with my kids. I have 5 children. My oldest is 39, my youngest is 18 and just went off to college. So I have been a parent for 40 years without parole. And so when we had this conversation, I said, so what mommy wants is I want to be stuffed and mounted and move from fireplace to fireplace every 3 months, much to their horror. I hope I haven't horrified you too much, but they don't know if I'm kidding or not, but I really feel like, you know, a little revenge is in order here. Oh, I do want to say one more thing on this. A client told me once that this celebration of life, he said, whatever happens with this is how I'll be remembered. This is going to be the last thing that people see of me, the last experience they have of me. That put it into perspective of how much it matters. So I always like this. I like the thought that, you know, our tombstone has 2 dates and everything, our entire story is in that dash between the 2 dates. So relationships, you know, all of this stuff comes down to relationships. Every single one of these choices comes down to relationships. Rejection from family cuts deep. Give me the opportunity and the courage to make things right from those estranged from me. I had a poll question, Natalie, it's okay. It's, do you have a family member you're estranged from? You don't have to answer the poll, but just think about it. Because we live in a time, even my parents did, when they got upset with people and disowned them or didn't talk to them anymore. And I interviewed a chaplain at an institution in Ohio who told me that he estimated that 50% of the patients in that institution did not have family members, were estranged from family. So I kind of think of the fact, you know, the more people we push out of our life because we're not in agreement with them, like eventually we could run out of people. But the most important thing about the relationships, they are fixable, and mediators can do that, often fixable, or at least brought to a place where people can communicate. But this linkage, our generation is a connection between generations. It's a tie to the past and a link to the future. I had someone write to me and say that their mother had left a letter, and she said, my ending is not really an ending, because from my ending comes your beginning. And you know, I pay attention when people have family estrangements that they want to mend, because again, this is part of our story, and I think there's always time until there's not to write a different way to have our story. So there's nothing like the death of a moneyed member of the family to show persons as they really are, virtuous or conniving, generous or grasping. Many a family has been torn apart by a botched up will. Where do mediators come in? Well, estate planning, healthcare decisions, contested guardianship and conservatorship, funeral decisions, and definitely in family dynamics. My own thoughts on after I made this PowerPoint, you know, I was thinking about the power of working with people in this, and for me, I have to move you all off my screen. Mediation is about empowerment. It's about empowering our clients and their families. It's about helping them have confidence in their decision making and exploring as many options as possible. It's about keeping connections and people writing their own lives regarding healthcare, legal decisions, and relationships. And that they're participators and we're participators in this, not spectators. That we respond, that we're careful about choosing what we want to decide rather than react. And as mediators, we're cheerleaders and encouragers. We normalize the things that people don't talk about. This is life, the hard stuff. We normalize the hard stuff. We bring it into conversation. We walk bravely and boldly and unapologetically into those places that are real and necessary, yet dreaded parts of life. That is aging and sickness and death. Bringing choice, if not of the circumstances, what someone can do in those circumstances and who they'll be in those circumstances. So that they're always, I think, in these decisions, walking that fine line between hope and regret, because our lives are our story. Our stories are our legacies, and our legacies live forever. This won't let me change. There we go. So some statistics around end of life stuff that I thought were interesting for attorneys, et cetera. An insurance study, 17% of respondents want something willed to them for legacy. They want a keepsake from grandma, but 77% want stories and wisdom instead. And I do encourage people to leave their story, to ask questions, what audio form, video form, written form, whatever, to leave a message, to leave what they want to say, to connect that link between generations. Bank of America conducted a legacy study. 94% of people defined a life well lived as having friends and family that love me. 75%, I know this is over 100%, so it's a separate question, I guess, said it's about having made a positive impact on society. Only 10% of people said that well-lived life is defined by accumulating a lot of wealth. And this is what you find in end of life. At the end of life, relationships are what matters. And I think when we're helping people plan, we really need to keep that in the forefront. 65% of people surveyed want to give their money away while they're still alive. Only 27% want to wait until after they pass away. I just threw this in there because if anybody's like into looking for unclaimed life insurance, $7.4 billion in unclaimed life insurance. It's incredible. And from a healthcare perspective, and we all know lots of reasons for this, but the US has the highest chronic disease burden and obesity rate, 2 times higher than the other 36 high-income countries. And we spend nearly twice as much on healthcare, and our suicide rates are the highest. I got to say from being in the healthcare system that a whole lot of the cost of healthcare is around choice and expectation. It is around doing everything maybe when that's not the best. And part of that is around, you know, malpractice or fear of malpractice and litigation too. Those things are real. Okay, so Lindsay Green wrote a book called A Life Well Lived, and in it, she uses this for bringing up discussions on end of life with her clients. And she asked the question, imagine life ended abruptly right now, and tomorrow would be a world without me. What responsibilities and commitments would be left dangling? What messes, concrete and emotional, would I want to have sorted out? And she says she's seen this question just transform people's reactions to how they live next. Like you have a moment where you understand what's important. For me, I've often marveled at, you know, how we leave a funeral. Like we leave a funeral determined to live so much better and so much fuller and to appreciate our life. But we lose sight of that, you know, sometimes a few days after the funeral. So I honestly think for me, remembering that my life is a story and the story will have an ending keeps that in the forefront. Yeah, so we're all going to die. The goal isn't to live forever. The goal is to create something that will. You know, the wills, the advanced directives, the POAs, end of life planning, relationships, these are all conversations on aging and end of life that we have to help people navigate these decisions so that there is less conflict, so that there's dignity and empowerment, mitigating for regret, so that our clients can write their own best stories all the way to the end and finish well. So additional tools, there's some great resources. The ABA has tremendous aging assistance resources. AARP has a whole lot of stuff. Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, that's a don't miss. I mean, there's not a word in there that I disagreed with on what the medical system is trying to do, and their successes and failures. The Conversation Project and 5 Wishes, that's a great tool to use for clients that actually lays out how to think through the processes around the medical side of death and dying. So what is it that you value? What choices do you have? Who do you want around you? Who do you not want around you? Just lots of questions on that. And of course, the National Council on Aging has tons of information. There is a lot of assistance out there. I mean, just a lot. As we're having such a high aging population, the resources are just limitless. And here is a shameless plug for my own book, How to Live Forever, a guide to writing the final chapter of your life story. It pretty much covers everything that we talked about, but in the relationship section, I do give some pretty concrete conflict management tools, including apology, reconciliation tips. There are stories in here, real life stories. They're beautiful stories. One of my favorite is a friend of my son's who was #1 tennis player in the United States at one time at 18, who developed cancer and died when he was 21. And his mother said, you know, I prayed for a miracle, and then I realized he was the miracle. I think that's an incredible way to look at life. So I watch people go through this. I have watched it. It is a sacred process. And yeah, leaning into it is transformative. I also have how to write your story. So I have a lot of questions that can be answered to how to leave your story in this, because the story part is the most important part. Not really, except the legal maybe, but it is important. Anyway, this is my contact information. I am giving this talk to the ACR at the end of the month, so I actually would appreciate any feedback if something was too much, not enough, left out. I stuttered. whatever feedback, you're welcome to send me, and if I can be of assistance to you or anyone going through these decisions, feel free to reach out. Now let me unshare.
Kim, that's
okay.
Terrific. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes. Let me just ask one question.
Sure.
And that is, can you give us a specific example where, as a mediator, you helped in a conversation between a parent and a child, or between spouses, and how specifically you as mediator actually helped some people, a family?
Yeah, so that happens all the time. And I think as mediators, yeah, I'm a fan of Ken Cloak and William Ury both, but as mediators, I feel like William Ury talks about going to the balcony, like sitting outside of this and watching while we're present, right? It's helping the people hear each other. It's helping to hear what they're really saying. It's helping understand what the underlying issues are. It's helping to see the options that they can't see. So it's making it safe to be able to have these difficult conversations. It's exploring people's vision of what they thought would happen in this. And then, of course, a coming together of those things.
Great. Thank you. We have a few minutes, so if other people have questions, if they could simply unmute themselves and ask the questions or make the comments, that would just be great. Please.
Kim, how does doula fit into your process?
I haven't worked with a doula. It's a great option though. Thanks for bringing that up. That's very cool. I hadn't mentioned that. I've spoken with some before, and but yeah, that's a very good question. A doula reached out to me, and I assumed it was a death doula, but it turned out she was a birthing doula. So I guess I have to be careful which end I'm talking about. But thanks for bringing that up. I can add that. I don't think we have many of those. You know, I love my state, but we're a bit behind in some things. So I personally don't know of any that are here, but I have talked with some.
Great. Others, questions, comments? I know we had some interesting comments in the chat. If anybody would like to voice those thoughts.
I have a comment.
Please.
Kim, I think this is a good field for non-attorney mediators. I'm also a non-attorney mediator. The last one of these that I remember doing, there were actually 5 attorneys in the room. The elderly couple had an attorney, and each of the 4 children had an attorney. So with 5 attorneys in the room, we didn't really need another attorney. And the mediation was held in the conference room of the nursing home where the elderly couple was living.
So I am on the ACR Elder Development Committee, and the one thing that is recommended is having a group of basically specialists. So you have your law stuff going on. If an attorney isn't comfortable in talking about the things that really matter, which is the relationship part, it's not that piece of paper, right? Because after that person leaves, there are still family issues that have to be dealt with and resolved. So I think as mediators, one of the most powerful things is bringing as much unity as we can. It's not just about getting some kind of an agreement. It's about getting an agreement that people feel good about and preserve the relationship as much as possible. So yeah, I've heard people recommend, just like you would for divorce, have different specialties for collaborative divorce to make it more collaborative. But there are plenty of mediators, attorney mediators, who are comfortable, recognizing that this is not the paperwork. This is a human. This is a pivotal moment. This is a sacred moment, and it sets the trajectory for the rest of the family's life. What happens in these moments, and.
Kim, you haven't mentioned dementia. As I remember, the elderly couple had dementia, and this must be a common thing in this type of mediation, right? So how do you deal with dementia?
Very good question. So I didn't use the word dementia, but I do it. So I don't know, different states might have different capacity screening kind of things, but by and large, screening for abuse is one thing, but screening for capacity, I make the assumption that I'm talking to another human being and they participate to the ability they're able, right? And it's kind of, depending on whether they have someone speaking for them, even with them, I want their input as much as possible. And maybe it's because I've just worked and talked with people a lot like that. You know how much, when they're there, you know when they have choice. So I worked with a attorney's family here, and she had dementia, and he had all their legal affairs in order, but their family was estranged, and she was getting worse, and he wanted her to have the best possible ending as far as reconciliation with the family. So we all gathered at their dining room table, which is where we had to go, and we had our conversations, and she sat at the table, and every now and then she would say something completely lucid and relevant, and sometimes she wouldn't. So I don't make assumptions about people's ability to participate. I make the assumption that at some level they can, and just go with that.
I have a question about the business end of this type of practice. One would be, how do people find you? Who pays you? I mean, if these questions aren't appropriate for this venue, then we can talk another time.
Well, I think because I'm promoting the ABA so much that they should pay me, but no, I'm kidding, Jeff. But no, it's private pay, and I'll be honest. When it comes to the healthcare section, I do some pro bono stuff because I do conflict coaching as well as mediation. So sometimes there's a fine line between the two of those, and I just kind of tell that on my own. So it's private pay. I will tell you that I ran across a registered nurse out in California who has a practice where she escorts people through the medical process, not necessarily through the end of life. So I don't even know that she knows about what paperwork is required and stuff, but through the medical practice. And she's charging $270 an hour, and it's self-pay. I mean, that's huge. I am not that expensive, but it is the client's pay, just like they would be paying for counseling or mediation.
I've got a question, Kim.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Oh, so a lot of mediators, we deal with family, divorce, we deal with desertion, possible destitution, lots of Ds. When you're mediating these kinds of cases, is it the same degree of self-care, or do we need more self-care when we're handling these kinds of cases as the mediator?
As a mediator, you know, I mediate the divorce, the parenting. I mediate them all with the same level of me in it. For me, I think that watching people go through the divorce and the tearing apart of families is as painful as watching somebody go through end of life. And part of that, you know, the end of life partly is a celebration. I mean, we're celebrating that someone was on this planet, that they made the changes that they did, but understanding that there's this circle of life, right? Like there's a letting go and a new one to come on. So, while, for example, watching my client, you know, I have mixed emotions with him. I rarely have that when I'm doing some kind of divorce or something, because there's like no upside to that very often. But for him, I see the beauty of how he and his family rise to these occasions. It doesn't really require more self-care. I honestly think it's an honor to be walking people through these difficult moments and making them easier for them. So it's exhausting sometimes, but at the end of it, you know, it is, Ken Cloak likes to say how we can actually be transformational in our mediation. It is transformational.
Well,
Thanks, Natalie.
And thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Kim. That's a beautiful note on which we can end. Thank you for a very insightful and enlightening and really uplifting presentation on a sensitive and challenging and difficult and important subject for us to face.
Maybe my hashtag should be making dying fun. How about that?
So can you show the slide for the Second Harvest Food Bank one last time so that people have the URL?
Oh, sure. Let me...
So we encourage people to contribute in honor of Kim and her presentation to
thanks, y'all.
the Second Harvest Food Bank of Middle Tennessee. We'll get the URL back up there. Maybe?
Okay. Maybe. Let's see. Maybe not. I'll just tell you the URL.
Go ahead.
Let me scroll through my notes. It is secondharvestmidtn.org. secondharvestmidtn.org.
A worthy cause. We hope people, if they enjoy what they saw, support the Second Harvest Food Bank of Middle Tennessee or another food bank of their choice. Natalie, any final comments?
Jeff, I have to say I was a little bit nervous at the beginning of this program, thinking that it might be a downer, and I was really pleasantly surprised at how positive and hopeful and just generally good I feel about having received the information, so I'm encouraged to share this with our colleagues and help them feel better about these things as well.
Thank you,
Amen.
Natalie. Thank you. Thank you all for coming too. I appreciate that.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. With that, we are complete. Thank you.
Have a good day.